Want to hear a secret? Promise not to tell. We are standing by a wishing well.
I'm not a soprano. As you can hopefully tell, I had watched his first full-length animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. And it was such a trip. I hadn't seen that movie since I was a little girl, and I remember being really into it too. I haven't really seen one of his more classic movies in a while. So, and actually I think the last Disney movie I watched was Moana. I actually played Snow White as part of the princessing gig that I do. Because I haven't played her before, it was really fun because she was so particular, where she has the very, very high voice. She definitely felt the most old-fashioned, which was part of the fun because obviously little girls and moms loved her, target audience, but old people were super into her and little boys were really into her too. I never received so many presents as a princess. I got an acorn, I got a piece of paper folded up like an accordion to be a little fan because it was hot out, and I got an apple. So I was charmed. The character charmed me. So what's interesting about this movie is because it's Walt Disney's feature-length debut, it's hard to think that there was a time before animated movies. But this was the first one. I mean, it's 90 minutes. So it's a full-on film, not a short. I have stuff written on my notebook. There were some character designs of Snow White and the Evil Queen that were a little bit more cartoony, so they wouldn't need an actress for design purposes. But he insisted on more realistic proportions, so she was made a little bit bigger. And it's interesting that he chose this story in the first place to do for his first one. I mean, it's a very smart move. It's a German Brothers Grimm adaptation, so it's something that adults and children are already familiar with. You have Snow White, who's very pretty, and you have the scenery. It absolutely stands up to today's animation. There's little bits about it, like her face, and the huntsman's face really stood out to me as being, hers was like a little simplistic, and his, when he talked, could be like a little bit wonky. But I find that to be really charming. I don't mind that. You have the dwarves, really, really, really long comic relief sequences in the middle of the film. And you have the huntsman who's the good guy, and you have the prince who comes and saves her at the end. So I can see how it can appeal to little boys, because I was thinking when I went and played her that kids even knew who I was. I mean, I figured little girls would because she's still on Disney products, but little boys absolutely knew who I was. So I thought maybe it's a Disney movie that they're more familiar with, especially for a princess movie. You have the Evil Queen, who is so edgy. She was saying how she wants the huntsman to kill Snow White and to bring her heart back in that box. And wow, could they get away with something like that today? Again, I was thinking of Moana. The threat in that film is not, she turns into a volcano, but she's not scary. There was that threat to her family, but she wasn't, the Evil Queen was scary is what I'm trying to say. She wanted Snow White dead, and she wanted her dead because of jealous, petty reasons. She was like, who's the fairest of them all? And it was like, well, obviously not you. You're wearing something that's literally covering your hair. Maybe if you let your hair down, you would like stand a bit of a chance, and you wore such crazy makeup. It's like, well, just don't style yourself like that, and maybe you'll be okay. But obviously it's a metaphor into your heart, not just your appearance. But the sequence where she turned into an old woman was really disturbing. But it was a different time too, and I think they were almost willing to be more edgy in that way, where now, I don't know, I kind of miss that in modern Disney movies, where it's like, I want that punch. Because again, when she turns, I was like, wow, how did I not have nightmares of that as a kid? Weird sequence where her hand shrivels up and it gets really gross and bony, and then it's like x-rays into her bones, and she's like almost looks like she's melting and freaking out as her hair is turning white, and she's in this creepy dungeon. Wow. Wow. It's so funny. One of the things where you know it's an older Disney movie is because there was a, I don't know, almost like parental push. I don't think that makes much sense. There's just a sequence in the middle, and from the cottage when she first arrives to when the evil queen shows up as the old lady, that chunk in the middle is a huge chunk of the movie, and it kind of felt like this odd, like, Snow White is telling all the animals, she's telling all the animals how to clean, and that you should keep a place tidy, and how to wash stuff. And then when the dwarves arrive, she's like, okay, you need to wash your hand, and they have this whole singing thing about washing their hands. Oh, this is like Walt Disney's way of being for kids by actually telling them how to do chores and to like wash your hands and to not talk to strangers. The cottage is so beautiful. The amount of detail that went into every nook and cranny in this frame blew my mind. Because it's a German fairy tale, so there's a lot of German references, German styles. But since I just worked at some Oktoberfest, I was like, hey, I recognize that. I recognize that pattern. There's also a lot of nature elements in it. There's a lot of animals that were carved into the wood or made into these like beautiful wooden instruments that were just so detailed. I should have looked it up. I don't know how long it would have taken to animate something like this, but you can just see the love that went into it, how ambitious they were with just the sheer amount of animals they used and the detailing that went into the house and the backgrounds. I was just so impressed. And like I said, there's only a few things that came off as like, oh, that's old school, but I was blown away. So something with the movie that I found really interesting, and I kind of knew this would be the case, especially since Disney was basing the story off of an even older story. And with older stories, this is something I'm learning more and more about, is that they're not as individualized with the characters as much as they're talking about archetypes and archetypal characters. And I kept seeing that when I was watching Snow White. And I don't have this entirely well thought out, but I kept seeing how it was kind of the female archetypes and how it can go good and how it can go bad between Snow White and the evil queen. Where Snow White she's beautiful, she's young, she's kind, optimistic, she's helpful. Where the evil queen is vain and vindictive and murderous. I mean, she uses a woman's weapon to try to kill her at the end. It's kind of a story about the best of the female archetype versus the worst. Disney really made it more of an individual story, not through the plot points, and not even really through the dialogue, but through the visuals. When I think of modern stories, which are very, very individual oriented, I think of Mulan or Anna and Elsa from Frozen, where these characters from their dialogue, from their plot points, are so specific. But the older ones are a little bit more generalized, and I think that's because the original stories they're exploring womanhood through archetypes, if that makes sense. The evil queen, in very obvious metaphorical fashion, she turns into a very hideous old hag, which is kind of a representation of like, that's actually how she looks on the inside, that's how she's presenting herself on the outside. And Snow White's downfall, even though she's so great, is the fact that she is naive and she's kind of so good she doesn't possess her shadow or doesn't have a shadow, she doesn't realize that there are people out in the world that she shouldn't trust and that she should put her foot down towards. Even though that's the moral of the story, I think ultimately they're not pushing it super hard in the movie, which I think is unfortunate because it's a good moral, I think especially for young girls, to learn that you should be kind, you should be optimistic, you should be helpful, and being naive about the evils of the world could be your downfall, and that it's okay to develop a little bit of a shadow or a spine or some teeth, and if your intuition kicks in, to kind of put your foot down and not bring the old hag into your house. The bookends of the story are so good and actually very fast paced and really exciting. And then it's just this long center of very long comedic sequences that I'm sure at the time people got a hoot out of, and some of it was still really charming and really funny. But I was just watching it, I'm like, okay, Disney, let's go. Let's get to the good stuff. But so the dwarves chase the evil queen up the mountain, and there is that interesting, and again, you would never see this in a modern movie, not really, in a modern Disney movie, not really, where there is this call to Christianity, because Snow White is praying in a scene. She's praying by her bedside after she tells the dwarves goodnight, and she wishes that Grumpy will like her at some point. There's kind of that deus ex machina at the end, where the queen is kind of like, I mean, she could defeat the dwarves if it looks like she's about to, and then there's kind of this divine intervention of the lightning bolt that just kind of takes her to her death. I mean, today we would call it a deus ex machina. It's interesting to see how these different societal and social elements changes the course of storytelling. Also at the bookend of the story is Prince Charming, or just Prince. I call him Prince Charming, but I think that's from Cinderella. I think he might just be the prince. But that's also something that feels so old-fashioned and kind of classic Disney, where he and the princess protagonist just meet and they fall in love, and he can be gone for 90% of the movie and come back and save the day, which is something just can absolutely not be accepted in a modern Disney movie at all. And I mean, that's good, because although I appreciate the classic romantic element of it and how important romance can be to a story, that's what I like a lot about modern Disney movies, is that the prince or whoever the romantic male lead is usually actually brought in for the majority of the movie, which is something I really enjoy. I like watching romances start off kind of bad and then build up and then become something really beautiful at the end, and I think modern Disney movies are so good at that. Just kind of funny to see where it all started and how little romance there actually is in the first Disney movie. I definitely found Grumpy and Dopey to be standout characters. They were very fun. Dopey was such a great visual gag. Grumpy was such a fun, someone had to be suspicious of a random stranger kind of taking over their house. So that was a fun little push and pull between him and Snow White. But they take up a lot of the middle in a way that's not super entertaining, at least by today's standards. The animation was beautiful when they were in the mines and it was just the whole screen was glittering. And a lot of it is very technically impressive, but story-wise, it definitely just sagged super hard and for a really long time, and then ended really strong. It's a beautiful movie. If you haven't seen it in a while, I would definitely recommend you watch it again. It's just so darling. And thanks for hanging out with me. I will see you guys next Walt Disney Wednesday or tomorrow. Bye.